We can write down the 5 key facts about promise theory on a single page. First, promise theory is about agents and how they interact. Second, agents can be human, machine, plant, animal, mineral, whatever. Anything that can play a role in a process is an agent. Third, agents can make and keep promises according to their own capabilities. Fourth, agents may try to impose on one another, as we'll see, but this may not be successful. You can draw agents as blobs and promises between them as arrows. We don't need a detailed understanding of what agents are or their nature. All we're interested in is the network of promises they make to get this kind of engineering understanding. Now, as you go, I recommend writing notes by hand with pen and paper. The act of writing engages more of yourself and helps you to remember. You can use the course notebooks if you bought one, or just any other paper you prefer. An isolated agent that makes no promises starts out free to do anything within its capabilities. An agent can only promise what it can do by itself. Autonomy is the state of being free to choose, and it's the default state, whether it's a hammer, a person, or a company. In practice, this freedom to choose is not very useful. Once the agent interacts or gets involved in collaboration, it has to voluntarily give up a part of that freedom in order to be part of a concerted action. The assumption that all agents start out as autonomous, yet suspend that freedom voluntarily, is the key to understanding promises and voluntary cooperation. It's the key to understanding society. Agents promise or volunteer to suspend their autonomy. Another way of saying this is, self-discipline brings predictability and self-control. Take an orchestra as an example. To play in an orchestra, the players or agents of the orchestra voluntarily give up nearly all their human freedom and become part of a finely tuned machine, trusting each other completely for this limited scope. Together, this allows them to promise to play music that would not be possible to play alone. Their individuality is partly retained in the roles or voices they play in the larger picture, but they give up their freedom individually to play a part in the larger orchestra. At this new scale, we might say that the orchestra is a single agent, a super agent, that promises to play a particular piece, like Beethoven's Fifth. Just as autonomous agents can make promises, so they can also withdraw them again. Subordination to a goal or a common purpose is not permanent. In fact, it has to be continuously reinforced as agents assess one another's promise-keeping to maintain a level of trust for them to work as a single entity. Our slogan here might be, agents give up freedom to discipline their outcomes. Now we need to make a key distinction. There are 2 ways of framing intent, and we call these promises and impositions. One of them respects autonomy, the other doesn't. Agents make promises freely only about their own behavior, without inducement or pressure, as voluntary cooperation. Promises can be offered specifically or generally. Look what I can do. You could place an ad in the newspaper or make a verbal pledge. Promises can be communicated in many ways, but agents can only promise their own behavior. Promising doesn't violate any other agent's autonomy. We draw promises, voluntary cooperation, with arrows. Impositions are uninvited attempts by agents to induce cooperation in one another. For example, commands, requests, demands, just do it, like spam marketing, or also when we're filling out forms for application procedures that impose a particular protocol to extract work from the other agent. They're imposing on the agent to force them to work on behalf of them. Impositions are an attempt to induce an agent to work on behalf of another. Imposition can be viewed as a prototype for attack, violating the autonomy of another agent. We draw impositions with a fist, a block arrow. It's meant to look like a fist to remind us that they're uninvited requests. Agents are in fact free to ignore both promises and impositions because every agent is autonomous and therefore it chooses which promises to make and to keep, and that includes whether to accept other agents' promises. But by ignoring promises, there might be consequences in the bigger picture. Apart from the distinction between promises and impositions, we also need to know about two directions of intent, and both are needed for intent to pass from one agent to another. Agents may promise or impose an offer, a plus promise, to provide something. The converse is that agents may express their intent to accept, a minus promise, or to use something. Every plus generally matches with a corresponding minus. When an offer is accepted, it forms a binding for influence to flow in the direction of the plus promise. Both kinds of intent, plus or minus, are needed in order for an intended influence to be passed on. I can offer you an apple, but you might not accept it. You might only accept oranges. You promise only to accept dollars, but I'm only offering yen. Sometimes acceptance comes before an offer, like when you place a rubbish bin, a garbage bin, out on the street. The bin makes a promise, I will accept your trash. Later you come along to fill it. So the order of plus or minus, offer and acceptance, are part of a protocol of intent. There is something quite deep here, which we'll come back to in an advanced course. This ordering, this directionality, is the key to cooperation. What about impositions? You can impose an offer, and you can try to impose an acceptance of an offer. You'd better take this. That's imposing acceptance. Promises and impositions are always side by side. An agent can even voluntarily choose to accept an interpretation that's wrong. For instance, when we take offense at an innocently meant remark, we're imposing an interpretation that wasn't intended. Agents can twist meaning. Impositions can be used to weaponize intent. Your smile was not kindness but harassment. The work bus was not an eco-friendly convenience, it was a deliberate intent to extort money from the workers. On the other hand, a gift is an imposition that's often a pleasurable surprise. So impositions are not always necessarily unwanted, even though they are uninvited. There's something in the chemistry of these interactions that explains when outcomes will be successful and whether they're predictable or not. Advertising intent through promises allows agents to voluntarily select who they'll work with and perhaps who to avoid, which promises are unacceptable, while impositions are always a surprise. Before moving on, it's worth making a small philosophical footnote. Sometimes we talk about enterprises as running like well-oiled machines. You might think that's disrespectful. In fact, the philosopher Lewis Mumford once said that replacing people with machines in a workplace wasn't dehumanizing as people often claim when talking about automation. Rather, dehumanizing is making people act like machines in the first place. Nevertheless, giving up our autonomous freedom is one of the most important things that we do. It's discipline. Recall the orchestra example. This was also the basis for agriculture and the Industrial Revolution, coming together in larger groups to become more machine-like for greater productivity. Since the Industrial Revolution, we've become used to thinking of processes as machines and computer programs, which are processes that promise to do exactly as commanded. We can think of machines as processes which have voluntarily given up all their autonomy, so that they're deterministic by design. Human and biological systems don't usually give up autonomy voluntarily, except in the military perhaps. They retain self-determination. Managers commonly mistreat human systems as if it were possible to command them. No agent is completely deterministic or reliable. We have to promise additional checks to offer the illusion of determinism, like machinery. It turns out that the nature of agents keeping promises is not always as important as the roles they play in a process. That's why humans can often be replaced by machines and vice versa. Agents have different capabilities, and they don't all have to be used at the same time. So we don't always need to worry about what an agent represents. It's enough to represent the player of a role as a blob or a circle that makes a specific promise in a particular context. Once the system's been understood, we can always revisit the casting of the roles to decide what's fit for humans or for machines. The fact that promises apply to any kind of agent allows us to relate promises quite easily to any enterprise or functional system. In this course, I'll use the Open Leadership Network's core as the basis for these examples. The examples map nicely to the modules in the course. Protocol. Promises allow us to formulate others' offers and acceptances. Leadership by invitation. Avoiding the use of attack or imposition by use of protocol. Clarity of authorization. What does authority really mean? As an invited symbiosis, perhaps. Empiricism. How does everyone or everything assess promises underway? Are the promises kept or not? Agreement. Do agents make the same assessments? This may be the basis for accepting one another's promises. Common knowledge. When everyone agrees about what was promised and what was kept. Group processes and boundaries. The cohesion of agents by common purpose, or grouping into super agents. I'm going to arrange these points as a number of case studies that map closely to the Open Leadership Network's key points. The order is chosen in such a way that each lesson builds on the previous ones. That way we'll see how the repeated use of simple ideas builds up a picture to demonstrate the principles.